Hi guys, my name is Yusuf Olúwafẹ́mi Salako, popularly known as Hori David, and you're welcome to today's session on ABC of Company Law. And today's topic is share capital, an introduction. And from this topic, we can glean that the fulcrum of today's lecture is to ensure that students get familiar with certain concepts and terminologies as far as share capital as a topic is concerned. So it means that this particular lecture will be in two segments. The first segment is on conceptual clarification, while the second segment is on alteration of share capital and maintenance of share capital. So in this first segment, we're going to be looking at the meanings and the legal implications of certain concepts, such as what a share capital itself means, such as the authorized share capital, minimum authorized share capital. What does it mean when we have the capital redemption reserve fund? What does it mean to issue shares at a discount? What is the meaning of nominal or par value of what? Of shares. So these are some of the concepts we're going to be looking at before we delve into the second segment, which is in a subsequent video where we'll be interrogating alteration and maintenance of share capital. So without further ado, let's delve into the heart of today's matter. So welcome back, guys. So the very first concept we are going to interrogate and consider is company capital, or what is otherwise known as share capital, or what some would term legal capital. So when we hear the expression share capital, the question is, what does it mean? Now, the word capital in itself should be a familiar word. Many a time, some of us, we have said something now, oh, I would have loved to set up and run a business outfit, a business venture, but I lack the capital to do so. And most times, when we employ the word capital, we employ it to mean money. No, we employ it to mean funds. We employ it to mean assets. So when we are speaking of share capital, one has to understand that it deals with a company that is limited by shares. So when a company is limited by shares, it means that company will have its share capital, meaning that the company will have shares that it can always offer for sale, so that those that are interested in being a part or being a member of the company we purchase the shares, thereby having equity in the company, and they will be hoping that when the company engages in business and the company becomes prosperous, that they would be able to get some sort of returns on their investment when the company makes profits. So it means that when you set up a company limited by shares, the company is set up to do business, and in order to do business, the company needs money. So when we are speaking of share capital, of course, it has the underpinning, the undertone of money, monetary value. But one has to understand that it doesn't mean that all the asset of a company is the share capital of the company. Of course not. A company can derive money from different sources. It doesn't mean that all the money that a company has is the company's share capital. So the question then is, what then is a company's share capital? Share capital deals with the value of the assets contributed to the company, or that the company receives whenever the company issues out shares. So which means that it is the money or any other consideration that the company receives from selling its shares that is regarded as the share capital. And one has to understand that the asset is not exactly what we are concerned with when we are speaking of share capital. Instead, we are concerned with the value of the assets. So what this means is, ordinarily, when the company issued shares, ordinarily the consideration would be money. So someone is supposed to pay in cash, so to say, for the shares the person has purchased from that company. Any amount that the company receives from that person would constitute a part of the company's share capital, because they gave out shares and they received that money. But one thing one has to pay attention to is that this money, this cash that has been received, would not be dormant, because it may actually be used to do business. So which means that particular cash will be turned into other assets. Maybe they buy plant equipment, or to secure a new space, office, and all from the exact money that they got from selling their shares. That is the reason that when share capital is being defined, it is defined as the value of the assets that is received by the company from issuing out its what shares. And from the beginning, I noted that when we are speaking of share capital, one has to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be considered or construed as meaning the total asset of the company. Share capital is not the total asset of the company, and the reason being that the company can, even before the company is set up, or from the moment that the company is set up, the money that the company may use to do business may actually be a loan. If a company secures a loan, that loan is not a part of the company's share capital. That loan is not a part of the company's share capital. The reason being that the loan has not been received from issuing shares. It's not like the company offered its shares for sale, somebody purchased the shares and then gave the company the money. So that will not be a part of the company's share capital. Another thing to also pay attention to is that when a company has started business, there is a possibility that the company will make profits. Now, the profit itself is not also a part of its share capital, even though the company may have employed its share capital to make that particular profit. The shareholders have a lively interest in the profit because it is from the profit that dividends will be declared. But that profit does not also constitute the share capital of the company, such that share capital is legally construed to mean only the value of the assets that the company receives from selling its shares, from issuing its shares. And when you look at section 868 of CAMA 2020, which is the definition section, so to say, it defines share capital to mean issued share capital of a company at any given rate. Issued share capital of a company at any given rate. When shares are said to have been issued, it is more or less saying that the shares have been sold, or they have been offered for sale. So people that are interested will show interest, then shares will be allotted to them, they pay the money or any other consideration. So you see that section 868 also defines it only to the issued shares capital of a company. So one has to pay attention to this definition of a share capital. Thus, from this definition and construction of share capital, it then becomes imperative that one should understand that a company's total assets may be higher than its legal or share capital, which means that the total assets of the company does not always have to be equivalent to its share capital, because the company, as I said, would use the share capital, the money it has received from issuing out its shares, they use it to do business, and when they trade successfully, of course they would have profits, and from this profit and all, certain assets may also be purchased. So it doesn't automatically mean that every asset that the company has is its share capital or is equivalent or equal to its share capital. The total asset of the company will most likely be higher than its share capital, and concurrently it also means that the company's total assets may as well be lower than its legal capital, than its share capital, meaning that at times when you look at the company's share capital and then you look at the other asset and all, and you find out that the legal or share capital is higher than its total asset, and it is in this particular instance that problems may begin to arise, particularly for the creditors. And that is the reason you find out that there are certain legal rules that have been put to place in order to protect creditors. This is the reason that the definition of share capital is practically limited only to the value of the assets that the company has received from issuing its shares, because there is a policy in company law that it is only the share capital that can be used to protect or secure the interest of creditors. And also, I need to also bring to your attention that there is something also known as the net assets or net value of the company. So it means a situation where you have to look at the assets of the company and then you minus the liabilities of the company. So that is that as far as share capital is concerned. So now we are also going to consider a concept known as the authorized share capital, ASC, authorized share capital. Now the concept of authorized share capital was introduced into the Nigerian corporate regime with the Companies and Allied Matters Act of 1990. So which meant that companies were supposed to have their authorized share capital. And when one considers the provisions of section 27 subsection 2, you see that it says of CAMA 1990, it says if a company has a share capital, the memorandums are also state the amount of authorized share capital not being less than 10,000 naira in the case of a private company and 500,000 naira in the case of a public company with which the company proposes to be registered. So it meant that companies were supposed to have their authorized share capital, and there was a minimum as well, but that is just what the authorized minimum share capital, which meant that their authorized share capital then was supposed not to be higher, was supposed to be higher than 10,000 naira. So which meant that they were not supposed to have any authorized share capital that would be lower than 10,000 naira for a private company and 500,000 naira for a public company. So which meant that companies were not allowed to say, oh, we're going to have our own authorized share capital to be 9,000 naira if you're a private company, or to say we're going to have our own authorized share capital to be 400,000 naira if you were a public company. So the question at least is, what then is authorized share capital? Authorized share capital is simply can be considered as the total number of shares, the maximum number of shares or value of shares that the company can attain if the company issues out all its shares. So a company can say, for example, that our authorized share capital is 1 million naira, and then the company says this 1 million naira will be divided into 1 million shares. So what the company is saying essentially is that each share, that is the par value, the nominal value of each share, will then be 1 naira. 1 million naira is the authorized share capital, and it has been divided into 1 million shares. So which means that if you purchase shares 1, 2, 3, 4 till you purchase all the 1 million shares at the par value, that is at the nominal value, the nominal amount, which is 1 naira, the maximum amount the company is supposed to make would be what? Would be 1 million naira. So another company can come and say its authorized share capital is 5 million naira, and they decide to divide this 5 million naira into 5, let's say they decide to say, oh, from 5 million naira, 5 million shares. If they divide it into 5 million shares, it means that they are selling each share for 1 naira. So if you purchase all the 5 million shares, the company is supposed to make 5 million naira. So to say that is like the highest amount of money that a company is supposed to make. And you find it that what in CAMA 1990, the concept of authorized share capital has been dropped. The concept of authorized share capital has been dropped, such that a company need not to now say, oh, this is the amount of shares with which we propose to establish this company, that this is our authorized share capital, or we want to have 1 million naira and we divide it into 1 million shares. That is no longer the case, but it used to be the case there. And the concept of authorized share capital was initially thought to serve as a creditor protection role. But over time, it was found out that it was indeed not serving that particular purpose. Instead, it was kind of regulating the relationship between shareholders and directors. For directors cannot increase the authorized share capital except with the consent of the members in a general meeting, that is the shareholders. So as a result of that, it was dropped both in England and in CAMA 2020. The concept of authorized share capital has also been dropped. So proceeding, we are going to consider a concept known as the minimum issued share capital, the MISC. So earlier when I was explaining the authorized share capital, I mentioned the fact that the concept of ASC is no longer a part of our law, because CAMA 2020 has now introduced the concept of minimum issued share capital. And when one considers the provisions of Section 27, subsection 2 of CAMA 2020, this becomes evident. Because Section 27, sub 2 says that if a company has a share capital, then in its memorandum of association, it must state its minimum issued share capital, which shall not be less than 100,000 naira for a private company and 2 million naira for a public company. So what this concept of minimum issued share capital mean is to say that when a company is to be incorporated, you are supposed to show that you have issued out shares, that is, you have more or less sold certain shares, and the shares for a private company that you must have sold out, so to say, that must have been taken by interested parties, must not be lower than 100,000 naira, and for a public company it must not be lower than 2 million naira. So this time around, you are not coming to say that, oh, this is our authorized share capital, oh, we are going to have 1 million shares, and this 1 million shares we are going to 1 million naira, and this 1 million naira we are dividing it into 1 million shares. No, you don't need all that. What you just need is to show that you have sold shares worth 100,000 naira for a private company, and for a public company, show that as at the time that you want to incorporate your company, you have issued out shares worth 2 million naira. And one may be considering that why jettisoning the authorized share capital for the minimum issued share capital. Now, one of the advantages of the minimum issued share capital will be that it is a leveler. It is a leveler, and I say this in light of the old position of CAMA 90, where when one considers the provisions of Section 27 sub 2b, Section 27 sub 2b, where it says the subscribers of the memorandum shall take among them a total number of shares of a value of not less than 25% of the authorized share capital. So which meant that under the old position, under the old law CAMA 1990, after a company has stated its authorized share capital, the company will only be registered where 25% of its authorized share capital have actually been issued out, so to say, have been taken. Now, the problem with that was that the higher the authorized share capital, the higher the burden on the company. So, for example, if a company has its authorized share capital to be 1 million naira, then it must have more or less issued out 25% of 1 million naira, which will definitely be 250,000 naira. So that means the company will be looking at how it can sell shares worth 250,000 naira as at the point of incorporation. But a company that has, say, 2 million naira as its authorized share capital, that company will be looking at how it will issue out 500,000 naira worth of shares, because that will be the 25% of 2 million naira. So like that, 5 million naira, you will look for 25% of 5 million naira. If your authorized share capital is 10 million naira, it will now be 25%. So the higher the authorized share capital, the higher the number of shares you must have issued them. So at times companies would set a high authorized share capital, but then they'll find it very difficult to be able to attain the 25%, and as a result of that, they would either be discouraged in setting up the company, or they may just have to reduce their authorized share capital as against what they actually wanted. But with the concept of minimum issued share capital introduced, it is a leveler, because it is not a question of the higher your authorized share capital, that if your authorized share capital, no, everyone is going to be running or be playing on equal footing, in the sense that whether your authorized share capital is 1 billion naira, the law says if you are a private company, just ensure that you have issued shares worth 100,000 naira. If you're a public company, issue shares worth 2 million naira. It does not matter the authorized share capital that you have. There is now a broad and general target for all companies. So it is a leveler, because now you find that what people do not have to be discouraged in saying that, oh, they cannot meet the 25% of their authorized share capital, or whatever, or would say that they have to reduce their authorized share capital. That is no longer the case. And the minimum issued share capital is also considered to protect creditors. But perhaps one should quickly point out that the minimum issued share capital, although it encourages individuals to set up companies, because you don't have to be running after the old 25% of your ASC anymore. But then one way or the other, the problem of encouraging or discouraging people from setting up companies is still alive, even with the minimum issued share capital. And the reason being that there is a problem or a major challenge with countries that have incorporated the idea of the minimum issued share capital into their corporate regime. And this controversy is as to deciding what the minimum issued share capital should be, because the minimum capital issued share capital should not be too low and should not be too high. If the minimum issued share capital is too low, then it will not protect creditors. And if it is too high, it is going to reduce competition, because it is going to discourage new individuals from entering into that particular field of business. So there is that particular issue. But most countries have actually been impelled, so to say, to follow the low minimum issued share capital part of the spectrum. And you find that if you look at the Nigerian position, that would appear to be the case. 100,000 naira worth of shares. That is just what you must have shown that you have issued out as at the time for a private company. So you begin to see that. But then if it is too low, people will be encouraged to set up companies, but then it may not be protecting creditors. And perhaps one has to do some sort of comparative analysis of the concept of minimum issued share capital as it is applied in Nigeria and as it is applied in UK. So in the United Kingdom, you find that the UKCA, that is United Kingdom Companies Act of 2006, provides that the minimum issued share capital would only apply to public companies and not to private companies. The minimum issued share capital applies to public companies. I think it's about £50,000, but it does not apply to private companies. And this has been said, so to say, to be a flip, so to say, that because of this particular position where the minimum issued share capital does not apply to private companies, that has been the reason why private companies are being set up in UK, so to say, because it facilitates or encourages individuals to set up company. But in Nigeria, we find that what the minimum issued share capital applies to the private company, and it also applies to the public company. And then one has to also quickly point out that the concept of minimum issued share capital only deals with the nominal value or the par value. So what this means is, ordinarily, when you're setting up a company, the law mandates that you're supposed to attach monetary value to each of your shares. So we're supposed to know the amount that you're putting down. Okay, for each share, this is the amount we are going to sell our shares. But I will come back to explain what nominal or par value means. But one has to understand that the par value is normally an arbitrary figure. Sometimes they may say 1 naira. Of course, they are not going to sell the shares for 1 naira. They are going to sell it more than 1 naira. But what they are saying is that they cannot sell it below 1 naira. So most times it's a very, very low amount, and it doesn't really reflect the market value of the shares. It doesn't reflect the amount that the shares is being traded on in the market, so to say. But when we are now speaking of the old 100,000 naira, it deals only with the nominal value, not necessarily with the amount that the shares have been sold. So meaning that for the minimum issued share capital, the law is to focus on the par value. Is it 1 naira you have put there? Doesn't matter whether you are selling it for 5 naira. The question is, how many of the 1 naira shares have you sold? So that we'll consider if you have sold at about 100,000 of the shares and you said the par value is 1 naira, that is when it will be deemed that, oh, you have met what? You have met the minimum issued share capital. Even though the 100,000 shares that you have sold, perhaps you sold them for 5 naira, which means you received maybe 500,000 naira. That is not the case. That's the share premium. The law is not focused on that as far as your minimum issued share capital is concerned. The law is focused on the on the par value. So that is that for the what? For the minimum issued share capital. But one has to then consider a situation. What then happens where the minimum issued share capital was met as at the point of incorporating the company. But later on, when the company has begun trading, but then you find out that what the company has not traded successfully, such that later on the share capital of the company is now lower than the minimum issued share capital. So which means that, let's say for a private company, we now find out that its share capital is now at about 90,000 naira. So meaning perhaps a company has reduced its share capital, and the amount that the company has, the value of the asset the company has on the sale of its shares or the issuance of its shares is just 90,000 naira. Whereas the minimum issued share capital is supposed, that is the amount of shares that must always be out, that must have always been issued out, that must have always been taken, must not be below 100,000 naira. The question is, what should happen in that instance, or what does the law provide for in that particular instance? Now, if you want to consider English position in England, you find that since the minimum issued share capital applies only to public companies in England, the law is that where a company's share capital or legal capital goes below its minimum issued share capital, that company will automatically be regarded or turned into a private company. Yes, because since the MIC does not apply to private company, they can go ahead and have, its share capital being lower than the minimum issued share capital, which only applies to a public company. But another thing to also pay attention to in England is that the law also empowers the Secretary of the State, that is the Act, empowers the Secretary of the State to be able to always alter the MISC. So at times, there might be an upward alteration, meaning that they may increase it from that £50,000 and say, okay, the MISC is now £60,000, and at times maybe downward, so they may have to reduce it. So this allows allows the minimum issued share capital to not be a static or rigid capital structure. Instead, they are allowed to always alter it in order to reflect current economic or corporate realities. But that is that for UK. But then the question is, what about a situation in Nigeria? What if the company's legal capital or share capital is below the minimum issued share capital? The question then is, what does the law provide for in this particular case? What does the law provide for in this particular case? And when one considers the provisions of section 124 of CAMA 2020, you find that in subsection 2, it says, no company having a share capital shall, after the commencement of this act, be registered with a share capital less than the minimum issued share capital. So it means that in Nigeria, your company will not be registered if your share capital is lower than your minimum issued share capital. So it means that in Nigeria, our own MISC is used as a condition for registration, not a condition for the commencement of business or trading. And this is a clear difference between the Nigerian position and the English position, because in England, the whole idea of minimum issued share capital does not mean that your company will not be registered. Your company will be registered. Your company will be incorporated. The only thing is that your company will not be able to commence trading. Why? Every company is supposed to acquire a certificate of for trading. And one of the conditions for acquiring the certificate of trading for public company is that they must meet the minimum issued share capital. So until they meet the minimum issued share capital, they will not be able to trade. So this is an incentive for public companies to want to meet the minimum issued share capital so that they can obtain the certificate of trading, and so they'll be able to trade. If they should trade without the certificate of trading, directors are liable. The outsiders, creditors that have also dealt with that company, as at the time the company did not have the certificate of trading, their interest is still protected. So you see, it is for commencement of trading you can be registered. But in Nigeria, section 124 sub 2 says that your company will not be registered if you have a share capital that's less than the minimum issued share capital. But the question we are attempting to provide an answer to with respect to the Nigerian position is, what of a situation where your share capital now becomes lower than your minimum issued share capital, meaning after registration and business has already commenced? What should happen in that instance? English law says then the company will automatically become a private company. But you cannot say so with respect to Nigerian position that okay, the company will automatically become a private company. In fact, there is nowhere in the act that it says so, and it may also seem illogical because our own MIC applies to private companies. So what if it is a private company whose share capital goes below its minimum issued share capital? What should happen in that particular instance? You see that the law in section 124 subsection 4 says, subject to subsection 3, where a company is registered with shares, its issued capital shall not at any time be less than the minimum issued share capital. So our own section 124 subsection 4 is saying that once your company has been registered, at no time should your share capital be lower than your minimum issued share capital. But the question is, what if it is lower? What if it becomes lower than the minimum issued share capital? What should happen? Then subsection 5, section 124 subsection 5 says, where a company to which subsections 3 and 4 apply fails to comply with the applicable section, the company is A, liable to such fine as the commission may prescribe by regulation, and B, in addition, liable to a daily default fine as the commission shall specify by regulation for every day during which the default continues. Our own position more or less penalizes or punishes company where its share capital goes below its minimum issued share capital. It does not matter whether the reason why the share capital is below the minimum issued shared capital is as a result of the company's direct activities, or it's just the ordinary play of business activities. It doesn't matter. You will be fined because you're in Nigeria. Nigeria is saying that your share capital must not be lower than your your minimum issued share capital. But in England, they said you will just be taken to be a private company. And since the minimum issued share capital does not apply to a private company, there is no issue or controversy or challenge or, oh, what if it's now the private company whose share capital becomes lower than the minimum issued shared capital? Another thing is that here in COMMA 2020, there is no provision, to the best of my knowledge, that allows the commission, CAC, to through say regulations, perhaps like the companies regulations of 2021, to be able to alter whether upward or downward the MISC, or MISC is perhaps fixed, because in England that particular tool of giving the Secretary of State the power to be able to alter it means they may be able to alter it to reflect current realities and maybe bring it lower where companies share capital is basically going lower than the minimum issued share capital. Then they reduce the minimum issued share capital so that will no longer be the case. But that is not the case as far as the Nigerian position is concerned. Then perhaps there is also another aspect that one has to consider with respect to this minimum issued share capital, and this may lead to a controversy, and that has to do with regulation 13 of the Companies Act. Of the Companies Regulations 2021. Now, Regulation 13 provides, it says, where at the commencement of the Act, a company has unissued shares in its capital, the company shall not later than 30th June 2021 fully issue such shares. Now, the question is, what is the oddity with this particular provision? Yes, the challenge with this particular provision is better understood and appreciated when one considers it in light of the provisions of section 124 subsection 3. Section 124 subsection 3 says that where at the commencement of this act the issued share capital of an existing company is less than the minimum issued share capital, the company shall not later than 6 months after the commencement of this act issue shares to an amount not less than the minimum issued share capital. So the literal meaning of section 124 subsection 3 is saying that upon the commencement of COMMA 2020, there is a possibility that existing companies, as companies that were already trading and existing before the new act was enacted, they may have their share capital to be below the minimum issued share capital. Say, for example, a private company was dealing, there was no law that said about the whole 100,000 minimum issued or whatever. So if a company had 90,000 naira as its share capital, say the number of shares it has issued out and received, assets and all, is 90,000. Now, the law says you cannot have such because it's now below the 100,000 benchmark for private companies. So Section 124 sub 3 says that they are being given 6 months time to be able to issue up shares that will then make their issued share capital to meet up with the minimum issued share capital. So for that company that used to have 90,000, they would have at least they would have 6 months to ensure that they issue more shares, say 10,000 naira worth of shares again, so that 90,000 naira share capital will now be 100,000 naira share capital, which would definitely then meet what the minimum issued share capital. But then when one considers it and one looks back at regulation 13 of the companies regulation 2021, which says that where at the commencement of the act, if a company has unissued shares in its capital, the company shall not later than June 30th 2021 fully issue such shares. Now the question is, does it mean that if a company has unissued shares, that is all their unissued shares, they have the duration of 30th June 2021 to ensure that they issue all the shares? Or is it that it is with respect to all companies that used to have issued shares that were lower than the minimum issued share capital? Is it that they were going to have up to 30th of June 2021 to be able to issue more shares that would ensure that its share capital is equivalent to the minimum issued share capital or above the minimum issued share capital? Because regulation 13 seems on its on the face of it to simply suggest that companies have to issue all unissued shares before June 30th 2021, and that in itself would be contrary to the provisions, the explicit provisions of section 124 subsection 3, which says they are only allowed, or they are only mandated to only issue shares to meet up with the minimum issued share capital, not that they must issue all their unissued shares. And when one considers the provision of section 723, which is on repugnant provision, you find it that yes, the articles of association, the memorandum of association cannot go contrary to the act. And also in the hierarchy of laws, you find that a regulation cannot also overtake an act. So the power to make the regulations was given or betrothed by the act upon the commission. So the commission cannot, through the regulations, blow hot and cold or speak in a different language from the act. The commission is bound to the provisions of the act. If KAMA 2020 says that the commission must fly, then it must fly. If KAMA 2020 says that the commission must crawl, then it must crawl. If KAMA 2020 says the commission must up, then it must up. Every goddamn thing that KAMA 2020 says the commission must do, the commission must do. So one begins to ponder or pore over the meaning of regulation 13 of the company's regulations 2021 in light of the provisions of section 124 subsection 3 of KAMA 2020. And this is all that I have for you today as far as your minimum issued share capital is concerned, considering the concept of issued capital or issued share capital. Now, this is pretty easy. Issued capital is the part of the shares that the company offers for sale. A company is not mandated to issue all its shares. In fact, it is desirable for companies not to issue all their shares in order not to dilute the interest of shareholders in the company. But like I've already stated, as at the point of incorporation, there is a minimum value of shares that must have been issued. That is the MISC. So, but when we are speaking of the issued share capital, we're talking about the part of the company's shares that have been issued out. So if, for example, a company has 1 million shares and the company then takes 200,000 shares and says, okay, we are offering this 200,000 shares for sale. If you want to purchase it, come and purchase it. The 200,000 that has been taken from the 1 million shares That 200,000 shares is the company's issued share capital. That is the amount it has issued out. That is the amount it has more or less sold out. And then we proceed to interrogate the concept of paid up capital. Paid up capital. Now, ordinarily, when shares are issued out, that is offered for sale, there is no law that mandates that a company must receive all the consideration, that it must receive full consideration for the shares at a time, that is at the time of issuing the shares. The law allows that a company may say, okay, pay a particular percentage, then later we can always call up on you to pay the balance. So meaning you can pay for the shares that you have purchased by installments. So when we speak of paid up capital, it means the portion of the value of the shares that you have paid the company. That's the paid up capital. So if you purchase shares worth, say, 100,000 naira, but then the company asks you to pay only 50,000 naira, and you pay 50,000 naira, which means you're still owing the company 50,000 naira. The company can always call upon you to pay the 50,000 naira at any time. That 50,000 naira that you have paid is the paid up capital. Why the 50,000 naira that you are supposed to still pay the company, your debt, is what we call the unpaid capital. So to say, that is the unpaid capital. And many a time, a company may have a target, in the sense that a company may say, okay, this is the amount that we need to do business, and they decide to go through equity financing, that is to offer their shares for sale, to issue their shares. And the company may look at it that, okay, the amount they put on the shares, if they should receive all the consideration from it, in this aspect, consideration is only limited to cash, at least for the purpose of better clarity, so to say. And they may look at it that if they should receive all the full-blown amounts, they may have more money in excess of the amount that they need. So look at, they do not need it. So what do? They say pay a portion. They get from here, they use it for business. You are still owing. When the company needs more money, they can ask you to pay your debt, that is to pay the remaining amount, which is the unpaid capital. So that is that for the concept of paid up capital and unpaid capital. Then we proceed to interrogate the concept of reserve capital. Now, the concept reserve capital is also known as reserve liability capital. Earlier on, reference was made to unpaid capital. So at times, a company may ask its members not to pay a particular portion of its issued capital with a view to reposing confidence in its creditors. So at times, your unpaid capital at times may be reserved simply for the purpose of defraying the company's debts to its creditors. So at times they may say, okay, pay this amount, don't pay fully. You want to pay for your shares in parts, pay so percentage, so proportion. But the unpaid capital, the amount that you are not paying, say the remaining 50,000, the company may reserve it that, okay, we will only call up on these shares only when we are to pay maybe our creditors and all. So it is seen as a reserve capital. It is seen as reserve capital. And then with this, we proceed to also consider the concept of share premium accounts. Share premium accounts. Concept of share premium or share premium accounts. We also need to cast our minds back to the explanation I made when I was talking about the par value. Now we are going to consider share premium in light of par value or nominal value of the shares. So ordinarily, the law says that companies are mandated to attach monetary value to each of their shares, that is a unit of their shares, which means that a company is ordinarily supposed to say that, okay, one share in this company is worth 1 naira, one share in this company is worth 2 naira. So that is what is known as the par value or the nominal value of the share, that is the amount of each share. Now ordinarily, companies are mandated to affix a particular amount, so which means they're supposed to put it there that, okay, for our own shares, each share is worth so amount. But while companies are mandated to attach or fix their par value or nominal value, companies are not constrained in actually fixing it, meaning that they are mandated to fix an amount, but they are not mandated to fix a particular amount, which means the law does not say, oh, your per value must be 5 naira or must not be lower than 5 naira, or the per value of your shares must be 2 naira or must not be lower than 2 million. It's just say companies are given the liberty to fix their per value or the nominal value of their shares by themselves. Now, ordinarily, based on certain reasons, a company would normally fix a very low amount, an arbitrary figure, an arbitrary amount as its per value. So they can say 1 naira. And one of the reasons for doing this is a company, the law prohibits a company from issuing shares at a discount. When one considers section 146, it says that it is unlawful for a company to issue shares at a discount. So what this means is it's a company will be issuing shares at a discount if it issues the shares lower than its per value. So if the company has already stated that its per value, that is the nominal value of its share, is 2 naira, if the company now wants to sell the shares for 1 naira, that is issuing shares at a discount. The law prohibits what? The law prohibits that. So because of this, companies will normally want to set the per value to be very low. Because imagine you set up your per value or nominal value of your shares for 10 naira. What it simply means that you cannot sell your shares below 10 naira, and that is a very, very high threshold. No sensible company would want to put itself in that particular position. So they will normally set it very low, such as 1 naira. But then one has to appreciate that the per value or the nominal value does not really reflect the amount in which the company would actually sell its shares, because it doesn't reflect the market value of the shares. It doesn't reflect the value of the shares that the company is trading with. So which means that even though companies are mandated to set the per value or the nominal value of their shares, there is no law that says that they must sell at that particular amount. They can sell above it. The only thing is that they cannot sell or issue shares below the per value. So meaning that a company can set 1 naira as the value of its shares, that is, every share is worth 1 naira. But then the company may be selling the shares for 10 naira. If a company is trading successfully, then the possibility is that the value of its shares would increase. So the company is trading successfully, and you cannot expect that the company will still be selling the shares for 1 naira. So the shares may move from 5 naira to 10 naira to a share maybe to be 1 million naira. So which means that a company may be selling its shares or maybe issuing out its shares, or the market value of the shares may be higher than its per value, that's 1 naira that they've written. So which means there is a discrepancy, so to say, between the amounts that the company has penned down as the amount of its shares, each share as its per value, and the amount it's actually selling. So that discrepancy is what is known as the share premium. So if, for example, you wrote 1 naira as your per value, but you are selling the shares for 5 naira, so there is a difference of 4 naira. That 4 naira is considered to be the premium. So when shares are being sold at a premium, it means they are being sold at a price that is higher than the nominal or the per value of the shares. And when you consider section 145 subsection 1, it says that shares of a company may be issued at a premium. So the law empowers company. It's an enabling provision. It empowers company to be able to issue shares at a premium. It empowers company to be able to issue shares at a premium. But then you understand that the law on share premium, there is an issue as to whether the maintenance rules should apply to only the share capital or to also the share premium. Now, ordinarily, we are going to consider maintenance of capital in a different video, in a subsequent video, the part 2 of this particular lecture. But then let me just give you a brief idea of what the maintenance of capital means. So ordinarily, when shares have been purchased and you have paid money, you've purchased shares, that capital is what the company is supposed to use to trade. The law tries as much as possible to ensure that the members of the company, because they are the ones managing the company. The law does not want a situation where they are going to find means to take the company's money and give it back to themselves. It is the company's money. They've purchased shares, but the law does not want them to find a means to take the money away from the company and give it to themselves. Why? Because creditors are going to be relying on the share capital. They are going to be relying on the money that they've paid the company from purchasing the shares of the company, and it is a limited liability company. So in a limited liability company, as we all know, there is a warning of irresponsibility, like was said in the case of Solomon and Solomon. The interest of the creditors may be prejudiced, so you don't want to become some sort of unsecured creditors. So there are certain rules that are put in place. So when a company wants to reduce its share capital, or when a company wants to redeem or buy back its shares, there are certain rules to ensure that the company does not make that the members of the company does not make the company to be a debtor to the members of the company, and that the company should not be paying them with the share capital. So the money they've paid the company, it should not be returned back to them. So these rules, the question is, should they only apply to the par value, or should they apply both to the par value and the share premium? What it means is, for example, if a company has provided its par value is 1 naira, but then the company is selling the shares for 5 naira, so which means the actual amount that the company is receiving is 5 naira, not 1 naira that they put in in their documents or in their constitution, so to say. The question is, all these maintenance rules, capital maintenance rules, as to keeping the company's capital within the company, should they apply only to the 1 naira, or should they apply to the full value that the company received from from the shareholders? So should it be that from the 5 naira they should take the 1 naira, since it was 1 naira that they stated as their par value, and keep it in the company? That is the company's share capital, and that is the one that they cannot distribute anyhow they like. But the remaining 4 naira, they can decide whatever it is that they like on it. They can redistribute it, give it to a member or whatever. Now this is it. Before 1948 in England, it used to be, the position of the law used to be that where the capital maintenance rules would not apply to share premium. So it used to be that, they said there is a dichotomy between your share capital, that is the money you received, or the consideration you received from issuing shares, that is the one the capital maintenance rules would apply to. That you cannot give it out to them anyhow you like, or whatever. When we get to maintenance of capital, you understand this better. So it used to be that the share premium, that is the extra amount that they received, that they should be able to deal with it anyhow they like and whatever. But then in 1948 the position was changed, such that now the position now is that the capital maintenance rules should not try to create a dichotomy between the share capital and the share premium. Instead, that it should take both of them fully, because creditors are concerned with the actual amount that you have received. It is the amount you have received. If you sold shares for 5 naira, it is the 5 naira that the law should try as much as possible to ensure that it is not returned to the shareholder. Not that they should get 1 naira and say 1 naira is a par value. They did not keep the 1 naira. That is the one that they are keeping within the company, and the 4 naira they can return it or do anyhow they like. But you find out that the capital maintenance rules apply to both the share capital and the share premium. And in order for this to apply, that is the reason you find out that the position of the law is that there must be a share premium account. So which means that the position of the law now, particularly post 1948, is to assimilate both the share capital and the share premium. So, but then, despite the fact that it is assimilated, you have to understand that it is not an absolute fusion, because in certain instances the share premium is also seen as a variety of the legal or share capital, which means that there are certain instances that you have to specifically make reference to the share premium. You don't just consider it absolutely as the share capital. There are times you have to make reference to it as the share premium, and in order to do so, the law now mandates that an account must be created where a company has decided to issue out its shares at a premium, an account must be created to be known as the share premium account, and it is in this share premium account that the premium on shares would be secured. So it will be in that share premium account. But you find out that what all your rules on reduction of capital, rules that are trying to limit or that are trying to confine or constrain the liberty of companies to reduce share capital, they also apply to the share premium account. That is to show you that the capital maintenance rules also apply to share premium as well as it does the legal or share capital. So when one considers the provisions of section 145 subsection 2, it says where a company issues shares at a premium, whether for cash or otherwise, a sum equal to the aggregate amount, or value of the premium on those shares shall be transferred to the share premium account. So once you have issued shares at a premium, you're supposed to put the extra amount. So if it is 1 naira that is your per value, you sold it for 5 naira, the 4 naira on it, the aggregate of it for all the shares you have sold, you're supposed to put it in this account. And when you consider the provisions of section 145 subsection 3, it says that the provisions of this act relating to the reduction of the share capital of the company shall, except as provided in this section, apply as if the share premium account were paid up share capital of the company. So it means that when we get to reduction of share capital around section 131, 134 of CAMA 2020, you see that there are certain rules. They are the capital maintenance rules. The law is saying that they will apply to the share premium accounts as if the share premium account were paid up share capital of the company. So which means that when you're reducing share capital and all these capital maintenance rules, we will not say, well, it only applies to the share capital. We have not redistributed the share capital anyhow. We have not returned it to the members. We have only done so with the share premium account. The law says no. That the same rules of maintenance, the same rules relating to reduction of share capital that govern your share capital would also govern the share premium account. So which means that the share premium account is still seen as a part of the company's share capital. So that is one thing one needs to pay attention to as far as the share capital is concerned. But one has to understand that the share premium account may actually be used by the company to pay up its bonus shares. So which leads us to the concept of bonus shares. What are bonus shares? So ordinarily, when a company wants to increase its share capital, so if the company issues out shares, the company is expected to obtain value for the shares it has issued out. You're supposed to obtain value for it. So if you issue out shares worth, say, 20,000 naira, you're supposed to get the 20,000 naira. So you're not supposed to dash it out. But then there are times that the company may decide to provide more shares for its existing members. That is, gives them more shares. But then when it gives them these more shares, you find out that the company will ask them not to pay for the shares, the additional shares, because the company itself would pay for this for the shares. So imagine I am a member of a company and I would say 10 shares, so to say, and then the company gives me additional 5 shares. Now this is it. I'm supposed to pay for this additional 5 shares, but then the company says I should not pay. It's a bonus. But then where will the company pay from? The company itself wants to pay for these shares. Ordinarily, the capital maintenance rule is supposed to apply here. Why? Because why is the company giving me more shares without obtaining value? Is it not an indirect way of the company redistributing or exhausting or extinguishing its share capital on something that is not bringing back the value for the shares it has issued? But then the reason the capital maintenance rule does not really apply when it comes to bonus shares is that issuing bonus shares really does not affect or harm creditors. Why? Because what the company has simply done, when the company issues bonus shares and pays from its share premium account, it means that what the company has done is to take money from the share premium account and put it into the share capital of the company. And like we have already noted, the share capital is used to protect creditors, because it shows that, okay, this is the amount that has been paid for the shares. And one way or the other, the law has tried as much as possible to ensure that no matter what, whether the company is trading successfully or the company is not flourishing, that at least this money will still always be within the company so as to satisfy the claims of creditors. So what you have just done by issuing bonus shares is to take the money that is in an account, a share premium account, and carry it and put it into the what? Into the share capital. So as far as creditors are concerned, no money has still gone out, the money is still within the company. So that is that for what for your share premium account. And this then leads me to then explain the concept of issuing shares at a discount. So for issuing shares at a discount, it is more or less the opposite of issuing shares at a premium. When shares are issued at a premium, it means you are issuing shares beyond or above the par value. But when you issue shares at a discount, it means you are issuing shares below the par value. So if a company has stated that its shares is 1 naira, that's the par value. So issue shares at a discount is now issue it below 1 naira. So under the old act, under Common 1990, companies were allowed to issue shares at a discount. But then, if you consider the provisions of Section 146, it says that it is unlawful for a company to issue share at a discount. So which means the position now is that there is an absolute bar on the issuance of shares at a discount. But then one may want to ask, why this change of law? Are there reasons? Are there grounds for this particular change of law? Why should company not be allowed to issue shares at a discount? Of course, it was initially thought that when companies are allowed to issue shares at a discount, that it will basically creditors, so to say. So they are now saying that they should not be allowed to issue shares at a discount so as to protect creditors. But perhaps a more prominent reason was to say that when companies are allowed to issue shares at a discount, that it may be unfair to shareholders, existing shareholders, because if companies are allowed to issue shares at a discount, it then means that the directors may decide to issue shares to a new shareholder or a prospective shareholder cheaply in the sense that we purchased shares for these shares, we purchased it for say 5 naira, and now you want to sell these shares to another person for 3 naira. So which means that this person is going to be getting these shares cheaply, and which is one reason why these people that want to get it cheaply may even have more shares than the existing members, thereby getting control of the company from the existing members. So some have said to protect shareholders so that they will know their interest will not be diluted. And so but then Goa and Davies have argued that in itself is not really a solid ground, so to say. And the ground for this assertion is to say that your interest can only be diluted based on the market value, not necessarily related to the issuing of shares at a discount. Because for those of us that will purchase the shares at 5 naira, it doesn't necessarily mean that the par value is 5 naira. The par value may be 1 naira. The company decides the amount it wants to sell the shares. So what if the par value is still 1 naira and the company decides to sell these shares to these people for 3 naira? It has still sold these shares cheaply without necessarily still violating the law against issuing of shares at a discount. So this is one of the criticisms for this position of when you place an absolute bar on issuing of shares at a discount, all on the basis of trying to regulate the relationship between directors and shareholders. Well, you find out that they can still find a way around it. And another thing also with respect to this whole idea of issuing shares at a discount, another criticism is also that it is too blind to the economic realities of the company. And this is what it means. Now, a company says its par value of its shares is 2 naira. And the law says they cannot issue shares, that they cannot sell shares to anyone below 2 naira. So they cannot say they want to sell it for 1 naira. They can sell it for 3 naira, 4 naira, 5 naira. That's a premium. But imagine that a company is not trading successfully, and so the market value of the shares have gone below 2 naira. Say it has gone to 1 naira. Now, if the market value of your shares is 1 naira, and you are putting up the shares for 2 naira. Let's say you are putting up exactly at the same par value, 2 naira your par value, and that's the amount you want to sell the shares. Most sensible investor would want to purchase your shares for an amount that is lower than its market value. So if its market value is already 1 naira, nobody wants to buy it for that 2 naira. Now the company is then in a limbo, so to say, because now people are not willing to purchase their shares for it at that even their par value, because the market value is already lower than their par value. This company needs money. At least any amount that the company receives, it will go a long way. And in fact, creditors would want the company to be able to get money at that particular time, because any money they still get from issuing the shares is going to be part of the company's share capital, which they can rely on for their protection. But because of this absolute bar, a company cannot sell their shares because it is now below the par value. Nobody is willing to buy it for 2 naira. Nobody is willing to buy it for 3 naira. Yet the law does not even allow them to say, okay, let us now sell our shares for 1 naira. That is, let us sell it below the the par value. That is, let us find a way to issue these shares at a discount, so that if we at least sell it for 1 naira, people would purchase it. We need this money, and then we get the money, we're able to do what we want to do. So this absolute bar on issuing of shares at a discount may necessarily be seen as being absolutely blind to the economic realities, and it does not provide for that liberalism, that flexibility for companies to be able to adjust to their economic realities. And that is that as far as issuing of shares at a discount is concerned. And that is also that as far as this first segment of this lecture on share capital is concerned. So in our next lecture, that is the part 2 of share capital, we'll be looking at alteration of share capital, that is increase, reduction of share capital, consolidation of shares. We'll be looking at the capital maintenance rules, that is maintenance of share capital. Till I see you next time, my name has not changed, for I remain Yusuf Oluwafemi Sanako, popularly known as Ori David. And not also forget to please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't subscribed, and for those that have subscribed, you are the real MVPs. And also ensure that you leave a comment. Ensure if you need any if you need me to explain any concept in any area of law, and perhaps particularly on company law, you may just drop it in the comment section there. I think somebody requested that I make a video on share capital, and that is exactly what has prompted this video. So you can also drop there. I like our videos. Thank you so much. You've been of strong and enormous support. Until I see you next time, I remain Yusuf Oluwafemi Sanako. Thank you.